Hello, thank you for joining today. My name is Damian Mingle. I'm the Chief Data Scientist for WPC Healthcare. Wanted to talk with you a little bit today on the topic of really artificial intelligence versus beneficial intelligence. We've titled this webinar today, "In the Brave New World of Healthcare Data Science, Is There Room for Physicians?" And this is something that is certainly been getting a lot of buzz lately, but also on the top of minds of a lot of our clients. So we'll cover that today. So the first thing to think about is kind of what's happening now. What's our baseline? And the truth is there's quite a bit of data being thrown off, being collected, and that reality is most likely not going to change. We're getting it from wearables and all sorts of devices, but really these devices, the wearables and such, are really in their infancy, and they almost don't have much meaning if they don't have context. And the context in the case of healthcare might be created with additional clinical information, maybe some financial information. It might be really interesting to kind of bring all that together. But most healthcare organizations are really struggling just to extract useful information from their EHR, let alone anything attached to it. The most important issues is this idea of data blocking. If you haven't come into contact with that idea, it's really it's quite prevalent, and the idea is simply that there's not a lot of data sharing that's going on. And in the case of EMR and EHR, a lot of the companies that have those kind of products usually put locks, if you will, on the data, and they own the data. It's not really the physician, it's certainly not the patient, although there's a lot of talk about that. Really, at the end of the day, it's the EMR or EHR. The unfortunate thing is we've all subsidized this investment of digitizing healthcare, and we certainly should get the value from it. I know as a patient, I certainly would love to be able to do that, but for that to happen, there has to be more openness around data. That way, the market can move in and be able to help solve the problems. The people that are out there are able to have access to the data, and we're able to tackle it more from a community type. Some of you may have encountered some information here as of late. Recently, so Digital Reasoning is a artificial intelligence company that is headquartered out of Middle Tennessee, and of course HCA has headquarters in Middle Tennessee as well. HCA is really investing in this solution. They're trying to get ahead of the curve. The interesting thing is, how does this really play out for smaller type hospitals and healthcare systems? HCA, not all of uh, the um, the hospitals out there have the deep pockets of an HCA. And really, what is cognitive computing, which is what digital reasoning is all about? And there are so many difficulties in just trying to get the information out of an EHR. How do you apply cognitive computing to that as well? Um, and it's really interesting because the idea of cognitive computing is you're able to kind of put one and one together to get something exponentially more, um, more than doing business as usual without artificial intelligence. And it's it's going to be over time that we're going to be able to see whether or not this actually has merit for HCA, and whether or not digital reasoning can assist in their efforts. Um, but on a broader level, how do other organizations that are not plugged into the HCA system, um, how do they benefit from cognitive computing when they're really just trying to they're trying to get their IT department to run a report for them? And again, the complexity of EHRs doesn't help the issue at all. So let's take a look at this idea of beneficial versus artificial intelligence. This is really an important distinction in our view. First, we really need to think about how can technology be leveraged to come alongside any kind of healthcare professional, and not necessarily focus on replacing healthcare professionals. That's the idea of beneficial intelligence, right? So some examples of that might be where humans and machines are able to kind of work together to figure out the structure of a virus, such as the causes of AIDS, in only 3 weeks' time. Neither one of them, machine or just humans, were able to do it at that rate before, but together they were able to take their collective power, if you will, and be able to make a solve for that sort of thing. The same sort of thing right now is active in healthcare and has been since 2000. That's Da Vinci robotic surgery, which is it's brought a minimally invasive surgery to more than 3 million patients since 2000. And that's just, it's not a robot on its own. It's not the surgeon on their own. It's the combination of the two that is able to achieve that kind of outcome. And you kind of juxtapose that to artificial intelligence, right? It's this idea of a machine that simulates brain behavior. That's an interesting thing in itself. But an example of this might be, for example, a computer program which can beat a chess champion, right? There's no need for a human being to be on the other side of the chessboard. It's just the machine. Um, and it's that undirected artificial intelligence which sounds scary for a lot of individuals, and the undirected aspect of that is scary. On a basic level, within healthcare, many organizations are still manually driven. It's just where they're at, and meaningful use most likely hasn't helped much in that regard to kind of help elevate their their operation. But it is what it is, and it's there, and trying to make use of it now becomes really, really important. So let's take a look at data maturity. All right, so this is, where does the industry stand right now? And the industry here, of course, is healthcare. If you'll notice up there in the right-hand corner, that's probably the edge of consumerism, right? That's Google just published something this week that said 91% of people that are in a executive meeting or a board meeting, if they don't know the answer to a question, will actually ask their smart device. That's the sort of information real time that we expect in our everyday life, but for whatever reason, in healthcare, we come back to the abacus for the most part, and it's hard to hear that, particularly when hospitals and health systems pay so much money just to get technology into their organization. I mean, it's not cheap. It's a very expensive endeavor. But being able to kind of tie these things, to integrate these things together, to again create bigger and more context to help with decisions, support people in the field, support people in the corporate environment as well, is really, really, really important. Some clients are actually at this calculator level, but for the most part, nobody's really after the calculator, and that's really, really, really difficult to hear. Okay, so here we're going to look at the data pyramid. The data pyramid is an interesting pyramid. It usually represents a couple of things. One, the complexity of issues, right? The fact that everybody understands claims data is probably because it's very foundational. And the pipes are already laid there, if you will, and so the information exchange is happening. As you move up from level 1 to 3 to 4 and so forth, it actually gets more and more complex. And there's also interesting value at each of those. And the value in this context is defined as kind of what would you do with it? How would you change your operation healthcare wise if you had this sort of information? So we look at WPC, we look at this sort of data maturity model often with our clients. And we look at it for several data types, both structured and unstructured. And there's a lot of people out there that are claiming, particularly around clinical information, um, give us 80, data is 80% unstructured, so give us more data and you're going to get better results. And that's not in fact true. In fact, all that 80% of data is unstructured data means is that you have more data. It doesn't mean that there's more signal in that data, which I think is a really interesting distinction. And sometimes, if you've ever worked with a group that's done some data science or data mining in the past, or you've done it internally at a healthcare organization, and you really haven't gotten the ROI you're looking for, sometimes what we see is a lot of clients will actually kind of go to the next shiny object, and in this case, it might be the unstructured data. Um, but here's the truth. If you haven't really done a really good job with your structured data, you're probably not going to have a good outcome with your unstructured data. Again, to my point earlier, it's not cleaner data. It's actually quite the reverse. There's a lot more noise in that data than there is in a structured environment. At WPC Healthcare, we really look at this in three different ways. Signal, Speed and usefulness. For us, signal is really, really important. Many groups claim that um, they can find that signal, and to my point earlier, if you're not able to find that signal easily or quickly, then you may miss an opportunity. The other thing is speed. Speed is really, really important. And this doesn't always mean faster and faster queries, but it also means generating insights at the point that the data is created. So if you think about this in a healthcare context, a good example might be around unbilled accounts, right? So if healthcare organizations have to wait until the unbilled finally becomes billed, and then processed by the health plan and then reported that they could actually pull a report that might have some meaning to it, it might take 3 months. And usefulness is really, really important, right? So usefulness is important. If you're in a healthcare organization and you're trying to run an operation through a rear view report, you're only getting part of the story. And that may not help you improve the organization substantially like you need it to. You need to think about yourself maybe in New York, right? New York City. Here's a great example. Think about yourself in New York City, walking down the city street, trying to get to the pizza place on Main Street, right? And so, in an effort to get there, all you're given is a hand mirror, uh, and you have to walk backwards to get to that pizza place. Now, could you do a better job of getting there if you were able to walk forward instead of backwards? If you were given binoculars, let's say, for increased visibility? We believe the answer emphatically is yes. Um, we really try to help our clients in the data maturity to kind of escalate, if you will, past the point of just data collection, yeah, into some of these other areas that can provide real value for their organizations. And it's really, really helpful to be able to have those conversations because at the end of the day, no matter where anybody is on the journey, the only takeaway that I can really give for you on this particular slide is that your organization should be working with someone or some group that has a philosophy and that has the same sort of philosophy and can help get you to where you want to be without obscene amounts of money or unrealistic amount of time before you see any kind of ROI. So let me do this. I want to share with you a slide that we share with our clients, and it really tells our story in a great way. The bottom line is WPC Healthcare looks to make data science practical or real. And these are various stages that we take the data through to get the results that we're looking for, whether that's around reporting or visualizations or some sort of predictive analytics. Some of our clients are interested in prescriptive, like what should we do here? And this is all built off of these different phases. So we usually start with the client's data. We usually normalize the data where we can. We start taking it through our analytical engine where we start doing data shaping and getting the question that the client has and the answer that's in the data in the right one-to-one relationship. Then we take it through a process of actually enhancing the data. So that's a little bit unique. And then the same thing with enriching the data, where we're bringing in additional context from other data sources that are either internal to the healthcare organization or external to the healthcare organization. It really helps put the data, if you will, in technicolor, which is really, really important when you're making decisions. Okay, well, we have a few questions here. I have time for a few questions, so let's see here. What is your realistic projection for when we might see some of artificial intelligence in practice in healthcare? Well, I can think of two groups. One is AI Cure. They are a medication adherence group, and they're really trying to detect through facial recognition and some big data who's taking what drug at what time. That's real time right now. Another group would be Cloud Pharmaceuticals. They're a drug development group, and they're combining artificial intelligence and big data to identify new drug compounds, which is really interesting. Let's take a look at another question here. What is WPC's perspective on data sharing? How does an EMR create competitive advantage with keeping my data locked up? That's a good question, or questions. We never share our clients' data. However, we do support open data. To us, there's a real fine line for someone making a moral hazard argument for not sharing the data to improve healthcare outcomes. Um, at the end of the day, these aren't really patients; these are people, right? So um, we try to keep that in mind and help our clients. We come along our clients when with that same sort of philosophy. The other part of that question, in short, um, the patient is supposed to own the data, and the company and the doctor, I should say, is supposed to own the record. Well, what happens when the EMR company locks the data in the EMR? This is what we were talking about earlier. Um, my question is, how can any physician claim to own a record that he or she can't access, except through the vendor? If the EMR vendor places some sort of lockdown mechanism on the database in the system, physicians really have a hard time exporting the data if they can at all to a third party. They really can't perform appropriate data analytics. It's difficult for them to run customized reports. They only get to run the canned reports that are come along with the system. And probably the worst thing is they're not able to convert to a newer, improved EMR. One more question here. My organization is still in the data gathering stage, and after major investments with a few national players, when can we realistically benefit from beneficial intelligence? Um, hopefully what came through this webinar today is that beneficial intelligence is an approach, but it's an important one. If your organization has the primary aim of leveraging technology just for technology's sake, it may be very, very difficult for you to experience any kind of beneficial intelligence ever. However, if you begin to reshape your company's approach wherever they happen to be on the data journey, you can really begin to see beneficial intelligence emerge immediately. The real takeaway is to remember that beneficial intelligence is healthcare professionals plus technology. It's not simply undirected technology. That's that's dangerous stuff in my judgment. I appreciate everybody being on the webinar today. Thank you for your time. If you would like more information about beneficial intelligence or a readiness assessment, please email us at info@wpchealthcare.com. Again, info@wpchealthcare.com. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you.